re-elected again to represent this neighborhood for 2 more years. And it's a true honor to come in. I can't believe how fast the first 2 years went. I still can't believe, I can't believe it's been 2 years since I've been running. It's amazing to me. But I want to say thank you especially to this organization and the folks here who have, there hasn't been a phone call that I haven't been able to make to ask questions about. When I've asked for opinions, when even when folks have opposed or been concerned about something, I want to say this particular group especially has been vigilant and has been there, has been part of all the conversations that have impacted not just the North End, but Boston in general. So I want to say thank you for that. It takes a lot. I know that the volunteers, your leadership here, I want to thank them for their work, but also yourselves coming here on the Thursday nights to be here to hear what's going on. So thank you for that. Just a quick update, and when was that meeting for the seaplanes?
Wednesday night.
Okay, so unfortunately I won't be able to be there, but we are dealing with the same issue, or the same conversation in East Boston. As you know, she mentioned it's taxiing over by the Hyatt in East Boston, so we will be part of that conversation as well. Just a quick update on last year's legislative win. We passed a law that allows for seniors who've fallen behind in their taxes, their property taxes, to stretch out that payment and also reduce them by half. That was something that we're very proud to do to help keep seniors in their homes. We will be getting an update on that law at the fiscal year starting for 2020 in July to see how many seniors have opted in. Has our outreach actually gotten to them? Have we been able to keep more seniors in their home? And if they're not, or if they're falling behind, how do we get them on those payment plans immediately to make sure that they can stay there? The other big update that we had a wonderful hearing on, and I want to thank Ford actually, who's not here tonight, we had an update on Airbnb. As you know, this neighborhood especially was impacted by that organization, or the short-term rentals. And I believe it was this week or last week that half of the units on Airbnb have just disappeared and gone away because they weren't registered. That was one of the requirements of our laws, that you at least had to register your unit. We want to know who you are, how to contact you, and to make sure that you just weren't some random person who had several different leases. Our law was about people, owner-occupants, being able to have 1 unit maximum on the website. We felt that that balanced the need for some folks who want to make money in their homes, at the same time didn't turn your home into a mini hotel. And so we're still waiting to get some of that enforcement data as the fines start coming out for folks who have now illegal posts or trying to post on other websites. We have coordinated with other short-term rental websites beyond Airbnb as well, to make sure that when they also have to pull their listings if they do not have a registration number from the city of Boston. So we're trying to coordinate an effort to make sure that they can't move to other websites. So far it's been what I would think is a success, considering we sued initially to try and stop this law. Airbnb eventually settled and agreed to do and comply with it. Just some quick in the neighborhood fixes. We finally, of course, as you know, finally completed Hanover Street this year. We're looking forward to getting more residential streets paved. And so what I asked for folks to do is to continue to send those street locations into Michael Benetti. And then we try to get them on the list for streets, Boston streets, to come in and pave them, fix the potholes, and then continue to make sure our neighborhood, and the bricks especially. I took a picture recently. There's some bricks missing here. There's bricks missing there. We did get the Bova's corner. I don't know if anybody noticed. That was a big victory for us. We got the Bova's corner finally fixed. And I wanted to do that before I
almost as tall as I am.
It really was. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't hear more injuries, but that corner has finally been fixed, and the bricks are getting fixed throughout different locations. It's going to be a constant thing that has to happen because it's a matter of maintenance. And if you really believe in historic preservation and character preservation, we're just going to have to maintain it. So do you want me to go all the way through, or do you want me to take question and answers?
I just want to comment. I love what you've done, but you also have to continue to provide the Department of Public Works with their need to do crosswalks. There are no crosswalks in that corner of Salem, Prince.
Thank you. Lydia, there were crosswalks. When they repaved it,
They didn't put them back.
They didn't put them back, and when they did put the crosswalk, they only put 3, not 4.
Okay. I think you'll find that the whole greenway is like that. because I think what they did probably, which was a good thing, was fix for the handicapped accessible ramps, which are at the crosswalks, but they repaved and they did not replace any of the crosswalks. And it really is difficult crossing, even though you have the light and I honestly don't think that the people driving are trying to hit us. I do think the crosswalk is an alert,
Right.
you know, to the driver. They see the white lines before they see us. So it's pervasive all the way down through the Greenway.
Those projects on the Greenway are actually the state. It's MassDOT that's doing that fixing before they turn the land back to the city of Boston. So the complaints should be directed to MassDOT especially. They're the ones that are slow walking the entire project.
Let's let the councilor finish her presentation and take questions.
So we have a new trash schedule, as you know, that we worked with the mayor to help implement. So far, we've heard very positive things about the new trash schedule. And so we'd love to hear continued feedback if you feel that it's not actually meeting the needs of the neighborhood, but we thought it was more of a reasonable understanding so that there wasn't so many days between trash buildup and trash being on the street. So it took effect this past summer, so we'll see how that goes through and how it works through the winter time for the first time. So I'm asking for really feedback and patience to see how it gets done, snowstorms, things like that, all that impact the schedule. And so we'll see how it works. The goal also, in general, we had a Clean Streets initiative, and I wanted to congratulate or thank all those volunteers that came out and helped it to the massive Clean Streets day we did. I can't remember. Pretty big cleanup. I want to say, how many people showed up? It was
About 30.
30 people showed up. So again, speaks to the power of this wonderful neighborhood, showing up and doing the extra, going the extra mile. So thank you. We had a series of coffee hours, as you know, throughout the summer and fall. We'll be back next spring with the coffee hours coming through. We might consider a winter hot chocolate moment or something like that. But honestly, those have been the best outreach. Honestly, just sitting down, listening to folks, hearing from them, and thank you all for coming. And also, if you want to reach us about anything, you all know the famous Michael Benetti. He couldn't be with us here tonight. He asked me to send his condolences. You know, he deeply loves us, but he has finals, so let's all wish him good luck on his finals. And towards his last semester in school actually is next semester, and so he's got to finish this one. Very proud of him, all the work that he's done for this neighborhood. So going into next year and what we plan to get done. As you know, before the year, I think I want to say in November, we filed a zoning ZBA reform. That was intended to basically say we need an overhaul of the zoning board of appeals. The way things are going, how they seem to be rubber stamping every single variance, that there doesn't seem to be analysis using the laws that are currently on the books. It's not working. It's not working. It is about, as you all know, the zoning board of appeals is about exceptions to the rule. You have the zoning, and then you go to them to ask for relief. That is something we want to continue. You should always be able to petition the government for relief. But there should be clear standards that are followed for that relief. And what all three of my neighborhoods say is that that is not happening. Also, a lot of people are confused about who should be on the zoning board. It is by statute mandated that there are 7 positions. A developer seat, a real estate agent seat, you also have a labor seat, you have 2 community member seats, and also a chair. That's by statute. And I said, I think we need to relook at those seats and that statute. We don't have someone representing environmental perspective at all. We don't have someone representing historic perspective. We don't have someone who's required to actually know zoning laws, like a zoning lawyer. So, again, these are suggestions that I have.
And neighbors.
I'm sorry?
And neighbors.
Well, the community members are supposed to do that. But the who gets to sit and actually have a perspective on this, I think needs also to be a revamp. It's been around since the 1960s. I'm just going to keep it. Since the 1960s that we've had this set up and these standards, and it's worth the conversation. So we filed it. The mayor told me he was actually already commissioned an independent report and review from Sullivan Worcester. I met with them. I was hoping to have the hearing this year. Their report isn't done. So we will file it immediately next year and push this conversation through. We want a functional ZBA that doesn't rubber stamp the exceptions to the rule. We want to look at the rules, we want to look at who's there. I actually said this in the Globe, and I mean this. I'm not trying to stop development with this. I'm trying to get people to trust growth again. To truly trust that the city is analyzing with the best interest for our neighborhoods and making sure that we're growing in a responsible way. I want people to believe that, and I don't think many people believe that. So, I'm sorry, sir.
It's an appointed position, not elected, correct? Which is the problem, right?
Yes, but also the statute says what person or what perspective gets to be appointed. So that's another problem as well. So I think we should also change the seats. Moving on, we are working with a lot of waterfront communities, especially on climate change and planning, and making sure I represent the majority of the waterfront in Boston, with Charlestown, East Boston, and the North End. And so what we need to do is have responsible planning. A lot of what got built recently in East Boston is resilient in that the buildings themselves are resilient to climate change. We need to be planning beyond just resilient buildings, which is that's what I was saying. In East Boston, so a lot of the resilient planning for climate change has been about assuring the buildings are protected on the shoreline. So the mechanicals are up higher. But that doesn't help a lot of the inner neighborhoods who are going to be dealing with the end result of those water in the flood zones. I have now been rezoned deep into East Boston where I live, and now I'm in a flood zone as well. And it seems like we are looking at and seeing that there's going to be additional flooding and the rezoning of that, yet we're still building, for example, in East Boston, a substation in a flood zone. So our planning and our predictions are not matching. If we're having flood zones expanded, then how is it that we're continuing to build in ways that don't actually help our climate resiliency? And that's a conversation that's happening amongst all three of my neighborhoods. I'm very happy to be part of that conversation.
The climate resiliency plan is coming up next quarter.
Yes.
Which you'll get a lot of answers to. The city has some ideas on how we're going to stop the flooding.
True, but if those plans don't match with the amount of development that's also planned, then we have a disconnect. And that's what we've been saying. We have also we're starting to work a great deal with the pilot community. That's the PILOT, that's payment in lieu of taxes. For those of you who don't know, our biggest meds and eds are called, they are nonprofits. Harvard's a nonprofit, MGH is a nonprofit, Tufts is a nonprofit, and they don't pay taxes. Yet they continue to, when they buy up buildings and they use them for their meds and eds purposes, they take them out of the property tax base. So I would say, I think it was almost like 10% of the land in Boston is no longer taxable because of their expansion. They do have tax revenue on their campuses. We've asked for those reports. We're not getting them. But the deal was struck years ago where 25% of the assessed value 25% of the assessed value would be a pilot payment as a volunteer payment. Half of that would be cash, 12.5% would be cash. The other half would be community benefits. That was the great deal struck. We got $30 million in 2012. It's a big deal. And that was the last time they've been paying their pilot payments.
Oh my goodness.
They've consistently come down, come down, come down, come down, come down. Harvard has a pilot payment assessed at $6 million, and we've never gotten all $6 million from Harvard. We have many meds and eds that have simply don't care. They also have not defined community benefits. One actually turned in their report saying, well, we're a nonprofit high school, and well, those kids don't go to BPS, so subtract how much you would have paid, and that's my community benefit. So that's in writing, I'm not making that up. But what we're finding is that pilot payments is another source of revenue that we could look at to help pay for a lot of the impacts of having students in our housing, of having this, for many people, obnoxious growth in building and development that is not part of their nonprofit mission. For example, the endowment of Harvard is only second to the Catholic Church. They pay more in hedge fund fees to manage that endowment than they do in Patterson. And we're just asking them to follow up with that promise that they made in 2012. And that's something we're going to be very vigilant about. Yes?
There's actually a study that shows which one of the 50c3 corporations, which are basically all of your nonprofits like MGH, Harvard, Tufts, all of like Simmons, they actually have to report, well, they're not required to pay any dollars. They're required to report what they have actually paid. And if you look at the requirements and what they report, I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
Ashamed. Because they rely on police, fire department, EMS, paving.
Well, we also just think that that's part of being a good neighbor.
No, it's not being a part of being a good neighbor because they're not paying taxes. That's my point.
Well, that's my point.
Okay, so we need to let the council finish her presentation and take questions, because we have a lot of stuff to get to tonight. No, it's okay. Oh, yeah, no, not like that.
No, the floor is yours,
Yeah.
you can have questions after.
Okay. And then just actually yesterday, we passed the transfer fee. I'm sure many of you read about it, and I'm sure you may have questions about it. What it does is ask permission. That's all it does. It asks permission from the State House for the City of Boston to one day consider a fee of up to 2%. That means the maximum that it could be is 2% on transfers of over $2 million or more. So what we're asking for is permission within these boundaries to one day pass it. What does that mean? It has to go now to the State House to pass there. It will join at least 5 other cities that have also asked permission from the State House to pass transfer fees. The maximum of all of them so far is 2%. Nantucket's had one since 1983. They use it actually for resiliency payment. This is not, and we would join there's actually a statewide coalition forming around a transfer fee. And we would join the nation, and that 38 states have transfer fees. New York City has had a transfer fee since 1983 over properties that are sold over $1 million. They have generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and as you can tell by Manhattan doing just fine, their real estate agents, or their real estate economy is just fine as well. I brought this, I didn't bring it to share, but I brought this to show we had an independent study done, or the administration did, demonstrating what they projected in terms of revenue from a 2% fee, but also demonstrating what they felt would be a minuscule impact on the real estate economy in Boston because of our robust economy. The expected revenue would be about $168 million a year. That would have to go towards housing. That would have to go towards subsidizing housing, and that would mean a lot for even in the North End. If you look at the Mercantile especially, it's one of our housing issues where we could lose a lot of hardworking people and lose housing there because the current owners really aren't wanting to play ball and keep the rents at a reasonable level. This would help to subsidize a lot of those housing efforts. It could also be used for down payment assistance. It could be used for helping people purchase their homes. It could be used to help maintain homes and historic preservation. It could be used for many things. And so it is now going to be signed next week, and it will go up to the State House.
Great.
So that's what we, yeah, questions? Yeah.
So these transfer fees, they can only go for housing, they can't go into the general revenues, it can't be misspent by the politicians, et cetera. It goes into subsidized housing, et cetera.
Housing trust, the neighborhood housing trust, which we established. And many of the developers who are developing come to the trust and ask for money from it in order to lower down percentages of affordable units. Sometimes they'll say, oh, we have affordable units for folks who make $80,000 or more. They'll come into the trust and say, if you can give us $750,000 or $1 million as a blanket amount, we can lower that down for folks who make $50,000. So that's a good thing. This is not an anti-development thing. This is having a lot of luxury development pay for more affordable housing, going into our neighborhood housing trust. of which neighborhood members and myself sit on as trustees. Yes.
May I ask who's sponsoring this bill?
In the State House, we're hoping, we have 3 people considered, and so I'm not going to put their names out there because neither one of them have said yes, but we will.
Who drafted the bill? Awesome, so.
Thank you. So we will, I will be working with the State House and finding the appropriate person to carry it there, the House and the Senate. And again, it joins a gaggle of bills trying to do the same thing. And the biggest argument has honestly been Waltham, Watertown, Arlington, Brookline, communities around us are all looking at transfer fees to stop and to slow down, not even to stop, but to maximize the amount of income they can get from luxury development. And if I think the cities around us are doing that and Boston doesn't, then we set ourselves up for more folks coming in here and us not getting as much income as we could from that. Again, it's a 2-step process. We are asking permission only from the State House to have this conversation later. And I've let people know, we have let it wide enough that we can add exemptions to this as well, including owner-occupant buildings. You can come up with low-income individuals, seniors. You can come up with a list of exemptions still for this at a later conversation. You can come up with a sunset provision, which means after 3 or 4 years it will go away. You can also come up with a requirement that before we implement every single year, we have to have an economic projection, making sure that this is based off the 2019 numbers and projected revenue of $10 billion worth of already permitted and expected development to come to Boston next year. We may not always have that. We all were here during the recession. We did not have that. This may not be a policy that we need to keep in that time if we have another recession. But we have the flexibility, and what I'm hoping for is the permission to turn up and turn down to get the revenue that we need. Any other? Yes.
What's the name of that? If someone were to talk to their elected official about it, what are you calling it?
Transfer fee.
Just transfer?
Boston transfer fee.
Is that available?
You know what, when people ask a question, please identify
I'm sorry.
yourself. I've got a
I'm
couple of
Christine
people
Clements, I
that,
live on Charter Street.
thank you.
Yes.
No, I just said real estate.
Real estate transfer fee, yes. Yes.
Dave Kubiak, Cleveland Place. Regarding the enforcement of the new short-term rental ordinance, we heard from Dion Irish last month, and I personally felt a lot better after hearing what his office is now doing to enforce that. Is there any aspect of the enforcement or administration of the ordinance that you think could be improved, or do they seem to be doing a great job?
They seem to be setting up a good infrastructure, and I appreciate that. You know, they always, you know, I feel like a lot of the heads of offices feel very insecure about saying we'd love more money, because they technically can't say that beyond maybe the administration. But that's a question I will have realistically for him. Do you need, how many enforcement officers do you need? You know, and that we would have that conversation during the budget cycle.
I think he mentioned just 2 people in his office.
And I think that, you know, we probably even need more.
Yeah.
At least until it starts to regulate and then the system is a little bit more, I guess, efficient. But I think at this point, you're gonna need more people to physically go out to look and see. As you mentioned, they say they go out there, they ask questions. Does Lydia really live here? Do you know who Lydia Edwards is? She says that she has an Airbnb here. Have you ever met her? Because they'll go and check if it's owner occupied beyond just looking if you take the exemption. And the 2 people who do that citywide seems like a very hard task.
The other question related to the same issue is, the next item is to review a draft letter to the zoning commission. And the letter says that we support the application, or the petition, I should say, of neighborhood services to change the zoning code to make executive suites a conditional use where it is now an allowed use.
Correct.
Have you looked at that at all, that petition, and what's your feelings about it?
Well, I believe the mayor also is putting forth that zoning proposal. So I do support it, because what happened is the industry just adjusted a little bit to say, well, we'll just call ourselves executive suite since they're exempt from the Airbnb regulation. And again, to folks who are saying that's just over-regulation, All it does by making it a conditional use is require you to go through the same neighborhood process that other people would have to go through. Ask permission, present to your neighbors, and ask and see if you can get your conditional use. That's all it's doing. It just won't be as of right. Yes?
Dave just brought up a point about Airbnbs. I'm curious about the legal status in the sense that you say they're trying to prove that people live there, that it's owner occupied. But we all know people that have their name on the mailbox and they consider it their legal address so they can get a neighborhood sticker, but they never live there. They're still actually letting somebody else live there and paying rent or whatever. So how are they gonna sort of solve the problem of people that say that it's owner occupied when they really aren't?
Well, I mean, you would be able to say that to the person coming from the city of Boston. The city of Boston would check, hear from other neighbors saying she just doesn't live here. Her neighbor, she collects mail here. And then the city of Boston does what it's supposed to do, and that's investigate. Write me a letter, see if I respond, send it to that address, say we've done this several times. It seems like you're not responsive, you're not listening. And that's, well, to me, I think they're gonna try and collect the evidence for the case to say that you shouldn't be having an Airbnb.
Okay, but I'm just curious about the legal aspect. If the person says legally, that's my voting address, et cetera, et cetera. How do you prevent?
Agreed, I mean,
Okay.
agreed.
Just curious if they were gonna rewrite some rule to counteract that, that's all.
I think it's worth considering.
You have to prove that you're physically there so many days a year or something, that type of thing.
Okay, it's worth, I mean, we have checkups on this law planned so that we are asking these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And in some cases, if there is, resident tenants in a building, and you see a lock with a key, you understand it's an Airbnb, whether it's allowed or not.
Yeah, so again, looking at all points of evidence, having them come out there, and then the real question is whether two people can really do that kind of intensive investigation citywide. And I'd love to support that department in getting the resources it needs. Our neighborhood especially has been hit. We need to, I'd love to know that there's a district-wide, person investigating just District 1, and, each district, or that would be 9 at least, people dedicated.
It's another piece of the affordable housing puzzle.
We agree.
Yes.
We agree.
What other spin-off? You were talking about the ZBA reform, the 7 seats. Well, also part of that is when they have the, you were mentioning like somebody from environmental and so forth, neighborhood. As you know, when they have larger projects, they have the AIG.
The IAG is the Impact Advisory Group.
Impact Advisory Group, that's right. And the problem is, it's sort of like a fake thing because the developers, they're supposed to have a quorum with so many people that are, representing the neighborhood and that and so forth and so on. So at the same time, when it's to do with development, you may want to see ways to tighten that up because it sounds good. The mayor made it sound like it's something really good. In a sense, it's supposed to be, to point out the impacts and so forth. But many of meetings that I ended up attending, I know firsthand, is that out of like 12 people, 2 or 3 show up and they still have the meeting.
Right.
And so it's just something that think about for future development because the large projects are even sometimes more important than the small ones.
Correct.
And if the city's just going through the motions, it's not doing any good to the neighborhood.
Well, to the large and small, if it's outside your backyard permanently for the rest of your life, it doesn't really matter the size, right? And so we just want to make sure that whatever rules and regulations the city has, they're transparent, they're clear. The critique about the IAG I've heard many times. We just put a youth seat on there so that young people would start to get involved, and we did that so that young people would be there and asking questions about the impact on their lives. But that is under the BPDA's regulations versus what I'm looking at, which is just the Zoning Board of Appeals. My colleague Michelle, who as you know has come out quite fervently about eradicating the BPDA.
I bring it up only because zoning overlaps.
You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
So I'm Sean, I live over on Prince Street. You talked about crosswalks, streets. I guess I just want to talk a little bit about pedestrians.
Yes.
So is the best way to get sidewalks repaired, fixed, use 311? Or, I mean, the sidewalks, they've got asphalt patches and things have never come back to fix them. There's a lot of the expansion joints that, a lot of salt wear and tear, they start to open up where you've got like 3 and 4 foot, or 3, not foot, an inch wide kind of trip hazards. So I mean, there's a lot of them sprinkled around the neighborhood. Is 311 the best way to go, or how do we go about kind of getting the sidewalks fixed in addition to the streets?
311 is one way to go, but a lot of people think I have access to that, and I don't. So they think I'm hearing or knowing about the 311. I don't hear about them. So I encourage two to do 311 and either CC my office.
Okay.
So then I know that you put in I can refer it to the number myself. But a lot of people don't realize I have no idea that you had a problem with the sidewalk.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hi, I know now it's not your problem, but I actually was,
Would you just introduce yourself?
my name's Susan. I live in Susan Mulholland. I've lived here for 30 years. Various streets, Salem, Prince, Thatcher. I actually was caught in a frost heave brick. I tripped, didn't even fall. I'm now 5 major surgeries into an ankle surgery that went bad. And no one is responsible for this. I've talked to the city, I've talked to the state, I've talked to partners. Do you know how much money I've put into this that isn't insurance? You need to actually figure out not just what you were talking about, well, sidewalks. You actually have to understand that even like a couple of years ago, we had 9 feet of snow. I couldn't get down the sidewalks with crutches. Not to mention a wheelchair, which I used to do.
If I can, I can't speak to that specific incident, but I can just re-announce and remind people that we are doing 2 things. We're getting volunteers and also continuing our Snow Angel program. Our Snow Angel program was meant to get folks to help shovel out some of our seniors and folks with disabilities on parts of the city. One second. On parts of.
I'm just raising my hand.
On parts of public ways or like sidewalks in front of the homes that the city won't do, and it was to help them with that. So the rules for that, and if you want to call our office to be either be a volunteer, we try to match you with folks in the neighborhood. It's been proven to be one of the best things to match some of our young folks with our seniors, our newcomers with folks who've been here for years. You don't have to cook biscotti, or you don't have to do that and give hot chocolate, but a lot of our seniors have done that for our volunteers. They invite them in, they become very close, and it's been wonderful. For 1 second, it's been wonderful for relationship building, and so I'm happy to collect calls for both. Yes.
I'm full on going towards neighbors who need help. My point is, you can't even guarantee that sidewalks in the north end will be plowed so that people in either wheelchairs or canes, crutches, will actually be able to make it from one corner to another. Frequently, what happens is,
I'm gonna have to ask you, do you have a question? Because we've got other speakers coming in. So can you ask the councilor your question, please?
do you actually have people on the ground after a snowstorm to identify where people are actually doing the right thing, like plowing sidewalks, street corners?
I have people on the ground literally plowing out their neighbors. I have people on the ground checking in. One of the people
I
on the
don't mean
ground
neighbors, I mean
is,
city streets.
One of the folks on the ground is my liaison, Michael Benetti, who again had an exam tonight, but has been by far out over the north end working extremely hard to be on the ground, to know what's going on, to help assist people with their day-to-day issues.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Ellen. One last question.
Happy birthday.
Okay.